首に鎖をつけてでも連れて行く。
俺は飼い犬は嫌いでな。
Was Sue originally that kid from the Hell of a Boss pilot?
I'm a cat person.
Following the totally legit defeat of the true big bad of the show, Yappa presented his brother with something that their father had given to him when he was still in diapers, Shining Dragon card. Yeah, dude, you should really thank your stars that that card is still in mint condition if you left it with a toddler. But yeah, I guess the king assumed his first son would become the Red Sword Eye of Light based on the slowly developing shonen hair. Well, you're off by just one there, Kingy. Anyway, more on this later, as they did need to wrap up another long-running plot point of this show. Tsurugi's dual sword eyes led them to Stoke, where the spirits were doing their thing and bringing back one of the Purple brothers in exchange for the other. I dreamt I was some predator who was going after a shonen protagonist and was getting memed on for just this one scene. Of course, seeing the sleeping Suo, Rivore tried to do his usual thing and reclaim his brother's soul, but found nothing in what he referred to as a doll of bones. Yeah, in spite of everything this asshole had done to him, Suo not only recognized him as his brother, but had indeed sacrificed everything for him. Tsurugi's group found the two and finally made him realize how much his brother truly cared for him and how awful he had been to a homunculus that may not have been exactly like his brother, but was his family nonetheless. Honestly, this actually would have been a good tragic note to end the brother story on, but they still need to sell those cards, and they did need at least one more sword eye to progress this plot. And hey, just because a Suo was gone, didn't mean there was another who couldn't take up residence in the Doll of Bones.
Thank you!
While not explicitly said, probably because the characters didn't know anything about alchemy, the original Suo had been fully resurrected along with his eye and sword. He also seemed to have the memories of the homunculus version of himself, but of course did acknowledge himself as that kid. We'll get more into that later, but for now, with the proper soul having returned to its body, he finally had access to his sword brave and corresponding deck, entirely made up of mostly cards that just so happened to have been released in the US booster pack at the time. Good timing too, as a still brainwashed Sora had arrived and not surprisingly confirmed that Gardos was still out there somewhere. Thus the two battled in Suo's first battle of this whole series, and we're nearing the end. And almost immediately, we saw that his main strategy was core depletion with cards that could move them off of the spirit into the reserve. And if a spirit ever has 0 cores, they're automatically destroyed. Moreover, the charge effect of his light deck increased the removal effect. Dude, I was kidding about the Hunter x Hunter reference. With that, his main tactic was to stonewall his opponents, as in many conditions, once he got out his strongest spirits, it was almost a sure thing he could destroy them with his core removal effects. Case in point, when he got out his key spirit. When summoned, this card could move 3 cores to the reserve, which with charge effects, let him wipe out Sora's cards, which included his key spirit. And if that wasn't enough, for each spirit destroyed by this effect, the player gained extra cores for themselves. Thus Suo had enough to summon his other key card. Lightning Shion also had a core removal effect, meaning that even without charges, he could move up to 4 cores in one turn, which depending on the opponent could completely wipe out their field. In many ways, and kind of appropriately considering what the next battle is going to be, he used strategies similar to Tsurugi's deck, just with different methods of destruction. And with that, he actually managed to OTK Sora after being on the defensive for most of their game, rather appropriate for a deck featuring a snake really. That said, with his new angsty personality, Suo wasn't willing to cooperate with the Sword Eyes for now. Still, they at least got Sora back, though not with the usual sappy methods of breaking mind control, but rather a little shock to the system. Never tell him to take the 1 chip challenge. Sora would end up spending the following episode recovering, partially due to Gardos' brainwashing, though mostly from the heartburn and the runs he'll probably have later. Seriously, I don't think any amount of sugar can neutralize all of those chili peppers. Still, his childhood friend Kizakura was gonna try, which got Hakuwa a little jealous, yeah, a little out of nowhere, but they end up doing this whole love triangle between these three. I guess this VA is just meant to get all of the magical girls. But yeah, the B plot of this episode would end up being between these three, which honestly I could kind of take or leave it, but it's okay, whatever it is. Fortunately, there were some actually good developments here, including Brown now having a deep respect for Tsurugi after witnessing the bond between the brothers, and of course acknowledging that he was a strong battler who managed to defeat Gardos. Yeah, this dude might not be the deepest character ever, but he has remained consistent in terms of his loyalty to the royal family and strong battlers. And of course, then there was Suo, who somehow managed to put together a crew within what couldn't have been more than a few days or so. Granted, he did have some pretty handy abilities to attract others. Somewhere, Edward Elric is feeling a hernia coming on and he doesn't know why. But yeah, he was still unwilling to join the Sword Eyes, and I think he had good reason why, which the other characters even kind of pointed out. This wasn't the Suo that they had been traveling with for almost the entire season of the show. He was the resurrected human Suo, who might have had the memories of the homunculus Suo transferred to him, but he never really experienced them, and therefore he can't recognize them as his memories, or hold any sort of loyalties to the characters, other than his brother, who he has known before and after his death. This could end up being one of the most interesting character conflicts for this show, but unfortunately, they don't really focus on it. No, sure, they did hint at Suo having a bit of an identity crisis, but that's just it, hints, and it was more just about acknowledging his love for his brother, who he had become estranged with after he ignored him so much even as he was approaching his original deathbed. And yeah, I get that this relationship has been a significant part of both of these characters' arcs, but with Rivori having gotten so low focused throughout the series, it does kind of feel like they're backlogging a lot of these developments near the end, which I'm all too familiar with due to some other shows. All of that said though, I do like that Tsurugi is the one trying to repair the relationship between these brothers, who he probably saw a lot of parallels between him and Yaiba. Thus, it was rather appropriate that he ended up battling Suo, and as I said, both of these younger brothers strategically had similar decks that focused on destruction effects. And yet, Tsurugi ultimately won this battle, mostly thanks to the new card they had just gotten from his brother. Of course, after all of this talk about combining the light and darkness, this spirit's main gimmick was that it could give all fencer spirits, including itself, the ability to double brave, meaning that it could hold both of Tsurugi's sword braves. Obviously, this led to an awesome image of a sunrise pose, and also made Overay a serious powerhouse that could mold through Suo's Viper, and also give him some strong destruction effects against some of his weaker spirits. With that, Tsurugi managed to defeat Suo in honestly one of the better battles of the series, and definitely one of the best debuts for a new card. And they ended the episode with him also finally getting Suo to acknowledge his love for his brother, and convince him to join them in the ritual to summon the Sword of Judgment. These episodes were mostly made by the introductions of the new spirits, and unfortunately less so with the Alchemist brothers. I mean, honestly, it wasn't a bad resolution to their story, as Rivori finally acknowledged that he had been a piece of crap, and the revived Suo was actually pretty awesome, but yeah, of all of the storylines in the show, this felt the most rushed. Though, while I would have liked to see more between the brothers just to resolve their storyline a little better, I will say it wasn't bad, especially once you start to compare it with the other brothers of the show. So yeah, looking back on the series, this actually might have been the weakest storyline, if only because it felt incomplete. The biggest issue was of course Rivori, who was just not a likable antagonist like the rest of the Eyes of Darkness. He actually worked as a pure villain, but not so much for redemption when Suo was doing most of the heavy lifting. On that note, Homunculus Suo's sacrifice was pretty well done, with him finally finding a purpose in his life, doing something for his creator and brother. And at the very least, his memories will be able to live on in the true Suo, who is entertainingly edgy. He also has one of the better decks, which is justified having come out near the tail end of this series. Though of course, the highlight of these episodes was the debut of Tsurugi's final key spirit, Overay, which is just an awesome card. I mean, you try and describe to me something cooler than a dual sword-wielding dragon. Well, actually, something does kind of top that in the finale, but for now, that's still awesome, and it was even clearly foreshadowed with Bringer using the previous series' Double Braver. I also really liked how Tsurugi was clearly trying to repair these brothers' relationship after he had bonded with Yaiba. It's a good way of further highlighting how much he's developed over the course of the series, with his shiny new card even symbolizing him reconnecting with his brother and late father. Thus, overall, while the Alchemist Brothers had kind of an underwhelming little storyline, at least it was in service of introducing some awesome new spirits and developing our main character. Their brotherhood wasn't quite as good as the Elric brothers, though really nothing can beat the first anime either. Thank you for watching, and I hope y'all are having a nice week so far. Personally, it's going to be a little bit of a busy week for me, as I've got a lot of things I need to get renewed that I'm not looking forward to, but you gotta do this crap. Honestly, editing videos is a lot less repetitive. Still, look forward to that stuff. Until then, though, farewell for now, my friends, and, yeah, I think I'm gonna go buy some more hot sauce before I run out. Like I say, I'm addicted to the rooster.